Well, the FBI is taking the lead in a criminal investigation into the leak of Pentagon documents circulating online.
U.S. Defense Department officials are calling the leak a, quote, very serious risk to national security. The documents, which appeared on several online platforms, appear to contain sensitive information, including details on the war in Ukraine. They also suggest the U.S. has been spying on international allies.
CBS News Chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett joins us now. Hey there, Major. So tell us, how concerned is the Pentagon, and do they have any clue who the leaker could be? I understand we're learning some more information about this.
Right. The level of concern is very high within the Pentagon, within the entire intelligence community. That includes the Defense Intelligence Agency, CIA, and all related U.S. intelligence agencies. They don't understand how this information got leaked, how it was allowed to be on platforms, some of them on the dark web, but not that dark web, for so long, weeks, if not months. And what we've learned very recently through reporting here at CBS News is that these documents are not leaked as a result, they think, currently investigators, of a hack, meaning that they were physical documents obtained, probably legally, and then taken out of the premises, whatever the premises that might have been, and then put on the internet. That is a crime, but it's the physical documents that is key. That would allow the investigators to sort of start asking a couple of basic questions. All right, who would have had access, under what time, and in which agencies? And by looking at these documents, there are some clues about those such things: agencies, timing, and proximity, meaning who would have been around them. And that narrows or can narrow the search. And my sense is, and this is the sense that a lot of us who are reporting on this story have, is that the investigators are saying less publicly than they know. And they're probably closer to finding out the source of this leak than they're willing to admit publicly, but that's pretty typical in highly sensitive investigations of this kind.
Major, obviously I don't want to ask you to speculate on the why, but when you think about this, knowing the motivations of previous leaks, I'm thinking of the NSA, there's a concern about, spying on Americans and things that should be of, public interest, even though, of course, in the Ed Snowden case, there were serious consequences. Have you thought about the why? Why would someone with access to this kind of information want it out there?
So there are a couple of possible explanations, and there are several aspects of these documents. They're touching on the war in Ukraine. This particular person might have an axe to grind one way or the other about U.S. policy. Too strong, not strong enough. We don't know. There's also some intelligence that surfaced, denied by the Israelis, that the Mossad, the internal surveillance agency within Israel, was doing things opposed to judicial reforms, quote unquote, sought by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. There's also things about what the South Korean government was debating and how that was favorably or unfavorably viewed by the U.S. policy, again, vis-a-vis Ukraine. So there are lots of different parts in which these documents touch. It's not just the war in Ukraine. It's other parts of U.S. intelligence gathering. So it's hard to ascribe a motive. The one thing that was in the lead-in, which I think is worth addressing, and I've been through these stories before, the United States spies on its friends. It spies more aggressively on our enemies, but it spies on our friends. And guess what? Our friends spy on us. There's a reason for that, because everyone wants to know what's being said publicly. Does that match what's being said privately? And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And one of the ways you find out whether it does or doesn't is you surveil your friends.
Hey, Major, there's another group of classified documents that are making news today. We should say that these are completely distinct from the Pentagon leaks that we're talking about, but they're the documents that were found in the possession of former President Trump, former Vice President Mike Pence, and at the time he was the former Vice President Joe Biden. But the Gang of Eight in the Senate are actually reviewing these. What more can you tell us about that process and maybe what they're learning?
So first of all, it's not a gang. We call it the Gang of Eight, but it's just the 8 senior-most people in Congress who have access to most highly sensitive intelligence information. They call it the Gang of Eight. Colloquially, it's not a gang. It's just 4 Republicans, 4 Democrats. But they have been asking for many, many weeks, hey, give us a damage assessment. Give us a sense, intelligence community, what these documents were in the possession of, in order, former Vice President Pence, former Vice President Biden, and President Trump. How damaging were they? So when we think about this and we think about the magnitude or the lack of magnitude of the possession of these classified documents, we can have some understanding of what the damage was or wasn't. And now, finally, there's going to be an assessment and a specific readout, if you will, of what those documents were. So at least the Gang of Eight at the top of the pyramid of information in Congress can communicate that, or at least have some general understanding of it. What does that explain? It explains two things. It'll give these lawmakers some sense of how damaging this was or wasn't, point one. Point two, it underscores something that Congress considers very important. Congress writes the checks for the U.S. intelligence community. It assigns the appropriations, and it has oversight capabilities. And what oversight means is, at times like this, even though the intel community might not want to be as forthcoming, Congress says, no, you've got to let us in on this. And it's taken a while to get to this point, but Congress is now going to be let in on it.
Well, even if it's just a moniker, I do kind of like the idea of a bipartisan group of lawmakers sort of swinging their legislative bat, their carrots and sticks around Congress. All right. Major Garrett, thank you.
You got it.